Hey y'all, it is Alexis from Ask Alexis here for another comfy couch conversation. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, especially to get all these good vibes out. We're with the fabulous Jennifer Harrison, and you know how I know she's fabulous? Frankly, because I've seen and talked to her. But she is a business coach, the owner of Piper and Sloan, the lifestyle brand, and the Good Box. And I am eagerly awaiting my Good Box delivery because it's gonna have a candle and a scarf, and I'm going to try this face wash and then some earrings. I think that are just like those, and so
Yeah.
the tassel earrings are super popular now, and I love a big earring.
Uh-huh.
And so we have Jennifer to join us today. But the reason I wanted to talk to Jennifer is because Jennifer has a great story. Jennifer has a story that is not dissimilar from a lot of people who don't think they have what it takes to make it. And yet, here she is, all the way made it. And I know this is true because Jennifer is also a client. And so I get to hear about all the inner workings of her story, and she's far more remarkable than she accepts.
Mm.
So thank you for joining us, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, that was a great intro.
Isn't it good when you get introduced with it's like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, me?"
yeah, I like it. I like it.
So where would you like to start in your story? What is the most pivotal early moment you can think of?
Well, the one coming to mind is the moment that I learned I was pregnant at 16. I think that moment was just an incredibly defining moment in my life for many reasons. Um,
Give me a couple.
yeah. So I think it was obviously a big moment, a moment where where I knew a lot in that moment instantaneously. I kind of knew that I was pregnant, but was still really hoping that I wasn't. Um, and I really, that moment was like a defining spiritual experience for me. It was like I knew immediately that I wanted to keep my baby, first of all. Didn't, I mean, like, I don't have like moral issues around abortion. I don't have, right? It was just this knowing. And I feel like the information from the stick, the lines on the stick, felt like it came down and just like settled in my body.
Wow.
Like, I knew I wanted to keep my baby. I knew that it was going to be hard. And I also knew I could do it immediately.
Like
And
in that moment, you got the knowledge that you were pregnant, felt what to me seems like this pregnancy enter your body, and then not in the fun way. And then but at 16, is it really the fun way? And then you knew that you could do it.
I knew I could do it.
Like you didn't
And
doubt or anything.
I don't know how I knew. I don't know. I just knew I could. I was like, it's going to be hard. I'm going to do this. Um, and I didn't, and I happened to be at my boyfriend's house, who became the father of all of my children at the time.
How
I
many
was at
do you
his
have?
house.
Just so our audience can keep up. How many do you have?
I have 3 kids. Yeah. Um, and so, the way that life unfolded from that moment, I think tells the story of the family that I came from, and also the story of where I wanted to go in my life. So fast forward, right, through the process.
You can't just say drop the bomb like that and then fast forward. Like you let us into one of
Well, I mean, fast forward from that moment into the process of like, okay, so you have this knowing as this 16-year-old, but I also had a mom who had just recently remarried and had two had an infant and a toddler herself. So there was my brother and I, from my mom and dad, from that was both of their first marriage. And then years later, like when I was in 8th grade, my mom had another baby with her third husband, had another baby, and then another when I was a freshman in high school. And so I'm a junior in high school. She's got little ones. Now I'm pregnant. Um, and my dad at the time, where was he living at the time? He was either in Davis or Chico, and I still lived in Susanville, in the really small town that I grew up in. So he wasn't around, and we weren't that close at that time either. So I was really clear on, I don't, my family's immediate thing was, well, I guess you're getting married. I grew up in a rural, white, racist prison town, and it was based on like Christian values, a lot of the town, as are many parts of rural America. It may as well have been the Midwest, even though it was California. My life was really similar, I think, to what it would be like.
So you had to, so like at 16, it was kind of like, not only are you having to be a teen mom,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be a teen wife.
Life.
And I'm not down in anybody's values or morals, but I know that those are two incredibly difficult roles. And that seems kind of challenging to just throw on a six. Like, not only you got to be a mom and figure out how to be somebody's wife,
Yeah.
and then your husband to be is okay. How old was he?
He was 20.
Well, I mean, he had some time under his belt, but like 20-year-olds shouldn't get married, in my
But
opinion.
not good time under his belt, right? Like when I was a sophomore, we started dating. He had just graduated from high school. And, I mean, I like he was in jail for a while when I was dating him as a sophomore. And then, it's not like he was in a good place. He was
Christian values town.
in a Christian values town. Yeah. He was like, he was who my friends went to for weed, for example, like the older guy who, I don't know if I should be saying all of this, but I'm just going to say it. Like, he was just not in a good place. And I remember there are 2 times where I have punched people in my life. And one of them
Oh,
was, what's that?
that means something. It's only been 2 times.
Only 2 times in my life.
Listen, I had a grumpy bear inside me, so I was not a fighter all the time. But 2 times is not my record.
So, but one of them, so I must have been, so my oldest was born in July. So I was pretty newly pregnant on New Year's Eve of 2000, the year 2000. Um, and at that point, their dad was only 19. So we weren't married yet, but I was pregnant. It was New Year's Eve. And he and his roommates had a party at his house. And I'm sitting there, 16, pregnant, trying to figure everything out. I'm the only sober person at the party. And, their dad was, drinking and smoking weed. And, I watched him like do a couple lines of blow in front of me. And I just was like, it was in that moment that I knew I was going to be a single mom. I knew it. And
Well,
it was,
that could have been intuition, but I mean, you just set the scene where it's kind of like stamp the single mom stamp on her, right?
her pregnant 16-year-old girlfriend is out in the living room just like watching all of this happen. And then the next morning I brought it up to him, that I was like, I don't understand, like I don't get where you're at for where we're at. And he said to me, he started laughing at me and said, I'm 19. What do you want me to do? And I just had this like primal rage come. I mean, I felt it like come up from my belly, and I just screamed, "I'm 16, you fucking asshole," and punched him a few times. So like that's where I was. That's where I was. That's like what my feelings were, right? I I knew if I was going to keep this baby, which I had this deep knowing that I wanted to and that I was capable, even though I knew it was going to be hard, um, I was pushed into marrying someone that I didn't want to marry. I wasn't even sure that I really wanted to be in a relationship with this person, and yet I was having to go through the motions because the thing was, either you get an abortion and you can stay at home living at home, or if you're going to have this baby you can't have it here. You know, you've got to get out and get married.
Hold on one sec, one sec, one sec. Wait a minute. That doesn't compute, right? You can't. Abortion and Christian values don't tend to go together.
Right. It was a lot of hypocrisy. It was a lot of hypocrisy coming from my family. And ultimately, the thing was not, you know, the shame that I brought to the family. My family was fucked up anyway. It wasn't like the thing was really that they wanted it to be my problem and not theirs, right? They wanted my pregnancy to be my issue, which, like, now as a parent, I understand even less, right? Like when you're 16, you're just not, your prefrontal cortex isn't even fully formed. Like you're not capable of making the kinds of decisions that you really need to be able to make for yourself, let alone a child and a husband, even though I had to do that. And so, yeah, it was like I knew I was going to be a single mom New Year's Eve. And then, you know, a couple months later, we were getting married. And um and I had this, I mean, I really tried so hard at my marriage. Again, part of the part of the Christian values I grew up with, and I would say my family was like loosely Christian, like loosely, like I'd also wake up in the morning as a kid and sometimes find like my brother's wrestling coach's car in front of our house because he was sleeping with my mom. You know, it's like that kind of
So
Christian.
like the town is the Christian fronting town, right?
Yeah,
The family,
front,
so that's the culture, but people are people inside the culture.
absolutely. And I think the keeping up of appearances was really what it was all about. And so so I knew how to keep up appearances and I knew how to do it really well. And so I spent 10 years married to my first husband and absolutely was keeping up appearances, was, you know, 3 kids later, I had my third child when I was 20. So 16, 17, and 20 is when I'm giving birth. Yeah, learning to cook, learning to clean, learning to take care of babies, learning, going to college. You know, I had a little home-based business. I sold Mary Kay from home, bought my first house 18, like,
So these things they play a lot into why I find your story to be quite remarkable. For me, when I was 16, my mother was very sex positive. So I was educated on my body's parts. I was permitted to take sex education. I was told that when I had the urge to have sex, to talk to her about it, and we would get me on birth control. It
mm,
was not something that, so like I was not getting pregnant. I traveled. I didn't have a cell phone because it was 2000,
yeah.
or no, it was 99. That just doesn't feel like that long ago, except when I look
I,
a year now. But so I traveled with my alarm clock, and every morning at 6:01, I would take my birth control pill. Um, but I could not have imagined being somebody's wife. Mother would have been easy for me to imagine.
Mhm.
Somebody's wife, even though I would, in my trauma story, I thought that that was like the solution to everything was being,
Right.
the nuclear family. Um, and, but like, that is amazing. And you had like, so you just three children by the time you were 20,
Mhm.
and you had a house, you went to college, and you, sold Mary Kay.
Mhm.
When were you a teenager?
I wasn't. I
Did
never
you party at all?
wasn't.
Did
I
you?
wasn't a teenager. I didn't like I was breastfeeding when I turned 21. I didn't have a cell phone or go into a bar, step foot into a bar until I was like 24. I mean, I just didn't. But I was really happy as a mom. So, in a lot of ways, the best gift that their dad gave me was he became a firefighter, a wildland firefighter, which added to the stress of being a young parent because then I was a young single parent for at least half of the year. Fire season in California, we know it's getting worse and worse, but it was not good in the early 2000s either. Um, and it was one of those things like he had to find a way to provide for the family, which of course I appreciated, and it meant that I got to stay home and work from home with my babies, and that was an incredible gift to me. But he was also beginning to develop the mental illness that eventually he was diagnosed with, but after our divorce. So it was 13 years from the time we got married to the time that he was diagnosed. And the 10 years that we were married were just incredibly challenging. The times that he was gone and that I was home with the kids are some of my happiest memories. But like I bought, or it was his money, but I, but I signed all the papers, like picked out the house, this little $89,000 two-bedroom house that we had all of the babies in California, in Susanville, California, like
$89,000.
89,000. And
And this wasn't the 70s. Wow.
yeah, isn't that wild? The rural areas, Um, and so, our mortgage was like $700 a month, which was a lot for us. We were poor. We were really super poor. Um, and but that firefighting job did allow us to at least have some things, and have a home. Um,
I mean, you had what what is the American ideal, right?
yeah,
Like, that seems like what I watched on Roseanne.
yeah, right, right. And so
I don't even know where Lanford is, but that's
wait,
my rule. Lanford,
sorry.
Roseanne on the show, they lived in Lanford somewhere, and that's my rural experience. I grew up in Detroit, so
I didn't remember the name of where they lived, but yeah, the rural area is very interesting. So um yeah, it was like a few years of making it work. And I I think in those early years I had a lot of really cool mom friends, one of whom lived like two doors down from me. And so she became my like really my best friend and the person that I raised my kids with. She had kids around the same age. Her husband was a correctional officer and worked really weird hours. My husband was a wildland firefighter, was gone all the time. So we like, I mean, I'm surprised we didn't end up making out with each other a lot of times because we would just drink wine and chat. Like, you know, the kids would go to bed and we would,
all
chase
to set you up to make out.
my total companion. And we both were married at the time, obviously, but we both had, you know, situations with women in our lives. So I don't know how we did it, but we didn't. And
Sometimes it's like that though, right? Like, just because you're bi doesn't mean you bi with all your friends.
yeah, or like usually any of my friends. um, Usually that's like very separate, but in this case, I don't know. We were kind of the couple, and our husbands were kind of the, providers. But we would like paint walls together, and we did Mary Kay together, and we'd go to church together and things like that. So so there were some years in there that were not like complete torture, but it was in 2004 or 5 that I think my husband's mental health really started to deteriorate, and he left firefighting. We moved um, to Redding, California, which was um, like a I don't know, it's like a town of like 100,000 people, but it was much bigger than Susanville for sure, where I grew up, which is like 10,000 people. Um, and we sold the house, but weren't able to buy anything because he had quit his job. All the money we made was gone like really quickly. When we got there, he just refused to work, like refused to get a job, just flat out. And then decided he wanted to be a youth pastor, and then decided he wanted to do it was like just identity crisis and massive deterioration. So that's when things got really hard. That's really when the abusive behavior began. Mostly like toward me and my oldest child. And I became a shield for my kids. It was just it. And then being more connected because he wanted to be a youth pastor at that time, like abusing your kids and trying to be a youth pastor. And I'm living with all of the doctrine and bullshittery of the churches we were embedded into, right? Where you can't question your husband to the degree that they need to be questioned, and you are not supposed to tell them how to discipline their children, and you're not, right? And so I was like caught in this like desire to be good enough by my family standards, by religion standards, and also this like, what the fuck is going on? This person is becoming someone that I had only seen a glimpse of once when he was like 18 or 19, and he freaked out on his mom's very old dog for like pooping on his favorite shirt, right? But the dog was losing its function, all of its bodily functions. And so
Like that early on in your marriage. It's just
that was before we were married. Yeah. And then things were kind of okay, but
so was it you think it was exacerbated by the fact that there was a lot of change at one time and he wasn't not he refused to work or he couldn't find work. He just said, I'm not gonna get a job. You have to pay the bills. I paid all the bills, or because I know
yep,
broke men are cranky men. It's
broke men are cranky men.
like if y'all struggle, you struggle to get. I'm not a person that's like, oh, only be with men for their money. But because of the narratives in our society, and I imagine in like when they are not providing, they are not. If
Yeah.
they haven't done their work to change that narrative in their minds, then it's an identity challenge, and you know what happens when people's identities get challenged.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that he was I think he was starting to really struggle with his mental health prior to him deciding no longer to fight fire and to move and all of that. But yes, I think it was definitely exacerbated by our move. Um, and definitely exacerbated, I think, too, by trying to to be this like youth pastor figure as well, when I think he knew internally that there was something wrong inside. Um, but with the particular mental illness that he has, it's very people tend to be like really charismatic and really, so like everyone thought he was so awesome and so great, and so that was part of my struggle too. Like I had even
Crazy making.
what's that
That had to be crazy
it
making.
was 100,000% crazy making. Yeah, the narcissism that came with it was just absolutely, like I didn't know who I was. I mean, to the extent that I could even know who I was, being a mom and being in my very early 20s and trying to support this like man who's unraveling. I just, yeah, oh my God, it was horrendous. It was
What do you think besides just not being dead? Because sometimes I feel like when we're in our struggles, we think we can't make it through.
yeah,
And in our, like, at least in my experience and a lot of the people that I talk to, it is like this narrative of, oh, I can't handle all this, I can't make it through. But then when you look back, the thing that helped you make it through was just the fact that you didn't die.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I will say that that the thing that really helped me make it through was this guy who I'm friends with to this day, who I met in college, who was just nice to me. He was just nice to me. And the contrast made it so clear that I was being mistreated. And so the fourth time that my first husband asked me for a divorce, I finally said yes. So he had been telling me, at times like Thanksgiving Day when we're casually walking out the door with a baby and two toddlers to go spend Thanksgiving with family, we're like walking out the door. This is a vivid memory. I wish I could remember for sure what year it was, but he was like, you know, I don't know if I want to go to Thanksgiving. And then told me he didn't love me and I was raising our boys to be pussy ass mama's boys and he wanted a divorce. And so then we spent, of course, hours talking out and me begging, like, what do you mean you want a divorce? It's Thanksgiving. This is coming out of nowhere. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to just, just take it from here,
Right.
raise it, right? And so that had started happening. That had become a cycle. And by the fourth time he said that to me, I said, okay, fine.
In his mind, so was it clear that in his mind divorce meant like I'm divorcing all of y'all?
No, I no. In the beginning, he wanted a a divorce, but then also really didn't. Like he was lurking around and doing the let's get back together thing, um and I was pretty strong in the very beginning with no, no, this isn't happening. Um and then I started hanging out with the guy from class, right? And all of a sudden I was like,
His tender heart. Sorry, I
yeah.
to bring in the story so juicy. I forgot to bring in the bears.
And like his name's Dakota, and like he was just this
Oh,
cutie, and
yes.
and like he had an Audi and liked to drive fast and wanted to like buy me coffee and came from a wealthy family. Like these are not the people. This is not how my life was in real life. And it was this just delicious escape, right? Going out and dancing, having someone buy me drinks, going to a fucking bar, right? Like being a young adult at times, having that break to do that. It was just this really great situation where I had this friend with benefits, and it emboldened me to be able to put some boundaries up with my husband. And so,
I find it interesting because we're both, woo woo people. We do our work, we hire coaches, we get, all of the stuff to make sure that we're okay. But in those times before we knew like the deep self care practices and how to connect to self,
mm-hmm.
sometimes just a little bit of positive contrast is enough to be like, wait a minute, you mean it's something better than this?
Yes,
I
yeah,
can do that. I can do better than this.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
So how did you get emboldened? Yeah, let's get out of the trauma years. What was because you've had business and you got to be a business coach from having all these successful businesses. So let's get into the inspirational stuff, not
Okay, I like
where you
that.
came from.
So
Uh,
yeah, so I would definitely say Dakota was a big time catalyst for me, and then also my spirituality. It became incredibly clear to me that number one, I wasn't disappointing God or anybody else by getting out of that marriage, that I needed to, that I had literally that marriage, I had to leave it to save my own life. And I knew deeply that my oldest child was being tremendously negatively affected. So it was all of those things together that made me just go, okay, I can't do this. And there was a brief time where we tried to work it out, and I moved briefly to the Bay Area because he had moved to San Francisco. Um, and I was here for 3 months before I was like, no, you're not changing. This isn't going to be better. I'm out. I'm out for real this time. I'm out. So I moved to Chico, um, kept going to college, um, filed for divorce, and I had been working through my college years, both at a clothing boutique and then also for catering companies. I loved to cook. I had taught myself to cook in my, early or in my teen years as a mom, and a wife, right? Like the homemaking became my whole life when I was young.
And
And so,
then now you do good living boxes. Not like now, literally, your business is making homes.
yeah, yeah. So I fell in love with homemaking, like fell in love with it, with everything about it. And I knew I could cook. Also taking inspiration from my grandma, who is like, her food was why we all gathered in their little house. She's my tiny Mexican grandma, just cooking up a storm for everybody, and I used to just sit
That's
at the
right,
counter.
y'all heard it. Her Mexican grandma, so that food was not bland.
It was not bland. Oh, everyone loved her enchiladas, but I loved her chili Colorado. Like that was my favorite thing. And it's not like the most popular Mexican dish, but it's like a curry. It's like a Mexican curry. It's just so fucking good. So I wanted to cook, and I had worked for these catering companies. I was like, I can do this. I can totally do this. And the one thing I want more than anything is to open a catering company. And it was also my final like nail in the coffin middle finger to my ex-husband, that I started, that my first business was a catering company, because I had talked to him about wanting to do that, about wanting to become a caterer. And he, said he would not support me, that that I'd be a hack at it, actually, is what he said. And that I couldn't do it. Like, you can't do that. I'm not going to support you. You're going to be a hack at it. So it was like,
That makes sense.
I can.
But also, I know that feeling like, oh, okay, what you ain't gonna do is leave me busted and disgusted. Okay, I might have hurt feelings, but
Right.
I'm going to succeed. I'm gonna level up after this.
Yep. And I was determined to do it. And I made it. It was all about like the seduction of food for me. And it was also this time, and this is the Dakota inspired piece. It was this time of like reclaiming like my sensuality and my ability to make something, to choose my own life, to, I named.
I feel like you didn't get a chance to claim it, and I feel like that's kind of real
Yeah,
because, like, at 16,
true.
you have sex, but it's not sex. It is not sex the way that my 30-something-year-old body knows sex. Um,
Oh,
and it also, like, then you went into like wife and momming, and with all those purity values, that like that is. I feel like you claimed your sex. Shout out to Dakota for teaching you your body.
I mean, let's not give him that much credit. I feel like no, but
He ain't turn you out, and I don't mean turned out like turned out on the stroll, but like I can remember my first guy to like show me how much I could enjoy my body,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then like from then on, it's kind of like that's the standard, and then every time it gets leveled up, that's
Hmm.
the standard.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that, yeah, I think I really needed I needed an experience with someone other than my shitty husband, who, um, anyway, so I named my company Blush. It was all about like, sensuality, like making people blush. I used to hear, or I heard at least one time that just my about me page was like gave someone a boner.
Oh, wow.
It was just so sensual, the whole thing was. And that's how I felt about my life at that time. I wanted to be romanced by life. And so it was that actually then. So I
I,
don't know, the first time. What's that?
I want some of that right now. I
Oh
like
God.
dance me.
Yeah, I think we always need to be romanced by life. I think that that is fundamentally my thing. I think that that was what was solidified in me at that time, was I want adventure, I want romance, I want sensual everything. I want food, I want sex, I want fashion, I want travel, I want to experience my life. Um Even the really hard parts. If it's something that I've chosen myself, something that I'm chasing because it's something I deeply believe in, then it makes all the hard parts worth it. They might not be easy, but they can be worth it. And I knew what it was to go through really hard things that were not worth it, that I didn't choose for myself. So, yeah. So I was newly moved to Chico. Dakota was still in Reading, so we weren't really seeing each other anymore at the time, but we were like friends. And I was in college, so I'm like going to college, worked for this almond delivery company and was like driving all over the North State in this van delivering almonds, and started my business. So I literally had 3 jobs, was in school, and met, to this day, who I would consider like the love of my life. So um it was just one of those really young romances. This guy named Chris, who ended up, we were together for probably a year and a half. But talk about the person who taught me about sex and my body and love. And
No wonder you didn't give Dakota. You're like, whoa, I don't know if I want to give Dakota that credit.
Chris, it was like, it was like all of a sudden, and also talk about contrast, like love was possible for me, and someone could care about me and care about wanting to be in my life. And my kids were young at the time. And Chris was.
You had 3 jobs, 3 kids, and you was getting turned up like, whoa. That's, I told y'all this story was remarkable. Cheer Bear approves. Okay, get your sunshine on, your tender heart, and raise them kids. This is,
Yeah,
I don't know how you did it because I know I ain't got those kind of chops. But man,
it,
I've been through some other stuff. But
I
that's
don't know how I did it either. There's so many times that I'm like, did I sleep? Did I eat? Did I do, what did I, how? How did I do it?
this
And there were.
in the mix is what. When did you know? Were you tapping into who you are? Were you taking care of you at this point too?
I mean, I mean, I feel like not in the ways that I do now, not in the ways that I like had the wisdom. I didn't have the wisdom for that yet. I was still just like so happy to have anything that wasn't traumatic and horrible. I was still like a sponge. I just spit a sponge. Like I was still like soaking up just the feeling of anything good, you know?
So yeah, tell us about the way Chris loved you. That might be inspirational for some people out there, and by some people out there, I mean me.
Well, I mean, I used to just feel like I could feel his resonance. Um, And I don't know, so he was Portuguese and Italian. So he was very handsome. And there was something in his like resonance. I remember what it felt like to like lay my head on his chest and feel this like warm and sexy, and I felt so incredibly safe. I knew that he like 100% always had my back. It's also been a long time. So as far as like particulars of our relationship, I mean, he was a great dancer. He was really social. It was so fun. He would get me out of the house, which was something that was really good for me too. And I had a great next door neighbor also named Jen who would like we would watch each other's kids. And so that was perfect in the apartment complex that I lived in. Like we could, you know, it was so easy for the kids to go next door. And yeah, and he was so proud of me too. He would like introduce me to all of his friends. And I was still in this place of kind of being ashamed about being so young and divorced and 3 kids that I didn't, you know, leaving my husband, I didn't know if I was going to find someone who would want to be a part of all of that.
That proud of you, that play, and not proud of you like in a way that makes it about them, but like proud of who you are as a person to me.
Yeah.
Like that makes you feel safe because you know that that person values you,
Mhm.
their role, like the role you play in their life.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Totally. Um and so yeah, it was really good for a while, and the reason I ended up breaking up with him was because of his mom, who was incredibly unsupportive, and I'm not even going to get into it, but said like some of the most heinous things to me before ever meeting me over the phone that anyone has ever said to me. um and she was just really not happy that her like perfect little son was dating this divorcee with 3 kids. And I decided, I mean, it was causing massive problems in his family. They disowned him. um yeah, I mean, disowned because of me. And I his dad ended up kind of, you know, going, well, you know, he is our kid, and ended up coming up and meeting me and spending some time. But his mom was just like not having it. And I just didn't have it in me to go through another really hard thing. And I felt like I was destroying someone's family. And so I broke up with him, and that was like the hardest decision that I knew I needed to make in my life. Um, and then Dakota started coming around again.
Oh yeah. Now,
Because we moved to Chico, and so then I had that going on, and you know, and Chris ended up marrying someone named Jen, and they have kids.
well,
Yeah,
we're not gonna dive into that, but
yeah.
you know what I'm thinking. So let me ask you this. Do you think that it had his family not been doing that, all that, all those theatrics, was this the situation where you were, and I'm not speaking about you specifically, but just typically the stereotype, right? Like where you were the troubled girl and he was your wounded healer, and then once you got full enough, you weren't feeling him as much because Dakota was fun and exciting.
No, definitely not. I would have hands down would have married him. And I'm glad that I didn't. I think in like when I look at it now, I think even if his just knowing who his mom is, it just always would have been a really hard thing. And I also think that he in some ways had these ideas about what he wanted his life to be like. And I think he did kind of have this like mentality, like, well, if I'm going to be here for you, like, you're going to have to go along with whatever I want, right? And I was in this place where I was like, I'm just finding myself. I've just opened this catering company. I've just like done all this, made all these big moves and big steps to leave my abusive marriage and move to Chico. And I didn't really want to move right away. And like once he was done with his year of student teaching, he really wanted to go back to the Santa Cruz area. And I was like, I just got here, I just got my kids settled, I just opened my business, like there's life stuff for me too that I think I would have really had to sacrifice if I had stayed with him.
Isn't it interesting? I think that once you do that, whether it's a self reclamation or just once you claim identity with yourself and not your role,
Yeah.
it is, I don't know if it's where it's like women are, the independent woman is too independent. It is difficult, especially in your case. I can see where you had done the like typical, well, not typical, but the dream they sell us, where you are, you're a wife, a mother, stay at home, and you stuck by your man, and
Yeah.
and then to come out of doing all the right things
Hmm.
and having to make a life on your own, it is very challenging to choose to give up that identity so quickly.
Yeah, and I wasn't in a place to do that, and I like that about that past me. I'm grateful to her that I stayed and that I ended things and let him move on and have the life that he wanted with the other Jen.
The woman in me is cheering you on all the way, because a lot of times, because of the way we're indoctrinated in society, we're raised that capturing a man, or not capturing, but being chosen,
Yeah.
is the thing. And if you are a single mother, like I can make the single mother story, it's like, am I going to be chosen again? And then to be chosen and choose yourself.
Hmm.
And then I know the rest of your story. Well, I know a lot of the rest of your story. So choosing yourself did not stop you from having any part of the life that they tell you you can't have. Spend
Yeah, exactly.
multiple business owner, you are home owner, you are
Yeah.
wonderfully, creative children you have, right? Like that are, so I just wanted to tell y'all that before she gets into telling y'all that.
Yeah, I think that is the biggest piece of my story that I think if anyone could walk away with is that it's been the continual choosing of myself that has literally saved my life and also allowed me to create a life that I am proud of, and that once you kind of flex that bravery muscle, it gets easier. It's really hard the first time you make a big decision, but I know like leaving my first marriage was a big, brave, bold decision. Opening my catering company, and I know that there were at least 3 times that I wanted to quit, like very seriously. But continuing on with that was also a big, brave, bold decision. Um, and I will say, as someone who's like in a healing process, you're going to make maybe big, bold decisions and then continue to fuck up too, like I did.
Lose your humanity. It's like our brains tell us this story that we're going to do this big thing and then it's easy street.
Yes, and that is such an unfair lie.
It's not the truth at all. You're going to do this big thing and you're going to have another big thing to do and more big things, because your ambition, your drive, your ability to dream and desire doesn't stop. It's not like you do a thing and then you die.
Right, right.
You have
And
to.
and there's also the other piece around like things can get better. Things can get easier. 100% absolutely. But just like you were talking about waiting for especially if you're straight, like waiting for a man to save you, we're also conditioned to wait for like the big business break to save us, or the big, like, nothing, if like, what if nothing is coming to save us? It doesn't mean that we don't have big breaks and that things don't get easier and we don't make good choices that make things easier. Of course we're going to do those things. But I think the idea that one day everything is going to magically just be perfect can actually keep us from staying the course and staying on the path to the better.
And it takes away from the actual reality that the thing that is necessary to be able to stay the course is work on self and work with your relationship with self and your emotions and your ancestors, your deities. It's a lot of work that, at least for me, I do a lot of interpersonal and personal work in order to become the kind of person that can achieve my dreams.
Right.
But the achievement of my dreams is the side effect of becoming the kind of person, right? Like life is a becoming and achieving. And well, I wish that I had been taught that and that more people were teaching that. But then because they haven't, I'm also glad, because that is a part of what keeps my business sustaining.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. Everything is cyclical. And yet we're taught these linear models, right? Or we're taught the fairy tale stories. And I think the the further I go in business and the older I get too, I think the more that I'm like, I just want what is sustainable, effective, profitable, and enjoyable for me. And so that I can keep going. Am I going to have big breaks in there? Yeah. Am I going to also have big frustrations and flops and failures? Yeah. So,
so? I forgot to tell you about this. And so I'm going to tell you now, even though we're not at that stage, but I forgot to tell you ahead of time. A part of the Comfy Couch conversation with Ask Alexis is you get to ask Alexis a question she's not prepared. The
okay.
answer can be none of your business, but it is, I promise to try to answer. One thing I want to talk about before we, because we've been on for about 40 minutes now, but I
Wow.
usually go for an hour and 20, like I talk, is where, what made you get the awareness that your healing is a consistent process and more
Mhm.
process of navigating life, and thus you get coaches and healers and support team along the way. What because you're a business coach, I have received coaching from you, and then now I coach you twice a month. On I haven't told y'all all of my methodology, but like,
Yeah.
what made you like? How did you get to the mindset that that's just a part of the journey? Like watching my mind by myself is not like I'm not supposed to be the only one watching it.
How did I get there? Okay. So I had this like really deep spirituality from childhood. Like I think my soul's been around this earth a few times. Like I'm not new here. And so part of it is like wisdom that I feel like I can't explain fully, but that I know that it's a remembering. Um, and I will say, I grew up on what was historically, before colonization in the West, was Maidu and Paiute land in Northern California. And they were speaking to me always. And I didn't know, first of all, how fucked up it was to live in such a white area and to grow up in a mixed race family and presenting the way that I do. I didn't even realize, because our Mexican heritage was very whitewashed in many ways. I didn't even realize I was Native American. I didn't even realize Mexican and Native Americans were like that Mexican people are Native American. Like I just didn't put that together.
Was a part of the continent of North America before colonization, and thus the people were similar, or like, you know, because I'm meant there's tribes and different tribes, but like we're not taught in our educational system to connect those dots. Like they teach things in silos so that you don't connect the dots.
Yep, exactly. So I can say that part of it was this kind of wisdom that lived in my DNA, and also the the curiosity I had around all things spiritual from a really young age. But I will absolutely say that there was a period where I would definitely say this was like a period of like spiritual awakening for me, where I was really meeting and encountering not the bullshit church version of Jesus, but like the man, like the old school, like having deep uh, encounters that were crazy. Like for weeks, I'd be like, so this is in the midst also of my shitty life with my shitty abusive first husband, trying to survive, trying to do all the right things, and I'm starting to have these like downloads of like astral travel, like out in the stars, and I'm being led there by like this spiritual man, Jesus, right? And I'm like, this isn't like what I'm being taught in church. And I'm having all of these mystical, what I would say now are like really quite normal experiences for me in the way that I work with like different deities and ancestors. And but it was like, you want Christianity to be your thing? Okay, well, we're just going to use that door. And it was like math equations, downloads, being out of my body, out in the
Wait, I
stars.
got some math equations too. When I
I
was a math teacher at the time, but that like when I would be teaching math, the numbers would shine. And then they would tell me something. I had to go around the back of the board and write what they told me and then go back to teaching.
Math is a spiritual language. Oh my God. Like I can't remember any of the things now, but it was like math.
Right over there on my whiteboard. Because it came. I know it, I get it.
Yeah, and it was like time was expanding and contracting. All of a sudden time was this thing that all I needed to do was, I mean, I formed the basis of my spirituality in like the hardest and loneliest season of my life, and it was through these initiations with Jesus, which sounds crazy because I'm not a Christian anymore, but it was
But
incredible.
but you also like, so I am the way that I understand how, and this is my personal experience with spirit, is the spirit can't give you what the mind won't allow, but it will teach you in whatever concepts exist in your mind if you allow it.
Absolutely.
So if Jesus was what you was rocking with, what you was raised with, and you were getting like that was a form.
Uh-huh.
In spirit, things are formless. So like the form was for your understanding, even if
Yep.
it wasn't, but it still could very for you, it very much is the energy that is associated with the highest deity because that's what you needed for your growth at that time.
Absolutely.
Maybe stop eating meat. But it wasn't like, if you know, now I eat meat again, I eat chicken. But I kept having the what is it? Because I'm not a Bible thumper, but I was for a couple years in my 20s, early
Mm-hmm.
20s. But the lady with the issue of blood, that
Mm-hmm.
kept popping in my mind when I was meditating after I had my spiritual awakening. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, she just took his energy. That's how she got healed. And then I'm like, well, what's my energy like? And the scientist in me is like, oh, well, in order to observe something, you have to change it, especially since you only know it at its baseline level. So I stopped eating meat and then I preferred my state of being.
Wow.
It's only my lack of self-care that makes me eat meat again because I get tired of I don't like to cook and I'm not a food. I used to be a foodie. And then when I stopped eating meat, food stopped being decadent.
Mm.
And so then it's just kind of like I eat to live now. And so, but I don't cook enough. I don't enjoy it. It's not a sensual experience. And so it's kind of like I need the meat so I don't have to eat as often. Um,
Right. makes sense.
Not like I mean, food tastes good, but it's just not
Yeah.
the price of life for me anymore. And I miss that though. Like things are not as rich as they were before my awakening.
Mm,
And now that, and like once I had my awakening, I was all fascinated by this veil being lifted and what all was possible. But then
yeah.
once that got normal, like I like to be stimulated. And
Hmm.
stimulate. I'm an Aries with Mars, and then I got a Cancer ascendant. Like I love impulsivity and stimulation, and you would think I would be a thrill seeker, but that trauma would be like, nah, you don't really want to risk things.
Right. Yeah, I relate majorly to that.
Um, and so yeah, I get it. Like that deep, that old. Well, first of all, I've seen her chart. She does have an old soul. But there, that deep inner knowing,
Hmm.
before you have the language for what that is. Once you get that language, you see how it's been guiding your life the whole time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that there were like major healing moments that came for me too in that time where I was being walked through healing processes internally and shit was just unraveling. I mean, like I am definitely someone who is like, oh, I know what healing is because I was literally directly spiritually taught what it was. And to the point where I had periods of my life where I would be just doing life. Like I could be at the grocery store and someone would walk by me and I would be able to see in their body. Like I'd be like, hey, this is really weird, but do you have a lot of pain like at the base of your neck? And they'd be like, yeah, I really struggle with the pain at the base of my neck. And I'd be like, so I'm really getting that this is connected to your mom. Do you have a rough relationship with your mom? And they'd be like, yeah, I haven't spoken to my mom in like 30 years. And I'd be like, so do you mind if I just walk you through a little, like, let's just kind of unravel this? Like that was just happening to me all the time. I'd know people's names randomly and what was going on. And I was,
Now I know why I like my sessions with you so much. That about you. So the thing that I'm realizing for me is I absorb knowledge
mm-hmm.
and I'm good at being able to absorb it and speak it. And so, but the things that you do and the things that I do are not similar until I'm working with you.
Right. Sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, it's just interesting. So I started working in these healing rooms where I was doing like what I just described with people. So I was like working as a healer and I didn't have any background as a healer other than these like really clear knowings because of my freaking clear ass channel to like these deities that was crazy. It was a crazy time. And so that's when I learned what healing was, what was possible, and how much I loved it. Like I am obsessed with healing, and I have been. But that's also when I started to see really clearly because it's like I'd I'd look around church and be like, this none of this is that person that I've been hanging out with. None of this is a reflection of Jesus. Like so much of it, and it became really clear to me that so much of it were cultural constructs that they slapped this God's name on and made cultural rules that fit them and just but it was like this glaring like I got to leave my husband, I got to leave the church. Neither lined up anymore with what I now knew to be true. And so interestingly, all of my encounters with Jesus are what sent me away from the church.
You was flipping the table.
Yeah, yeah, away from the church into my ancestry, into like goddess, the study of goddesses, into understanding the balance of different energies, really into understanding my need for remothering, um I mean, I am really grateful to that awakening for all that it has allowed for me to experience. And what it's allowed me to experience are all things that are like evil in the sight of church people, right? Like a lot, you know, like sex magic. What are you doing sex magic? That's evil, right? Like my my mom, who is now in her fourth marriage to like a very Christian man, is having her Christian revival period of her life. And she is like, I mean, I think she found out right near the same time that I was both studying shamanism and that I was dating a woman, and was just like, like
My baby's going to hell.
I was getting verses about how I was going to hell texted to me over the phone. And I'm just like, if you only knew that Jesus is who empowered me to do this. You have no, it's like just this, it was crazy. And so that's an interesting part of my dance through this world, that I have that in there, tucked back in there like 15 years ago. Um, and so yeah, since then I think, you know, healing, every healing modality imaginable I've tried, and worked with, and my own practices. And it feels like an ever deepening thing. And it also feels like the only thing that really matters. And I don't think I'm after healing anymore. I feel like I'm to a point where the major stuff has been excavated and looked at and dismantled and dealt with. But what all of the healing processes have taught me, I think, are what I really love about the human experience. And it's that that keeps me like wanting this continual evolution, because it's like intimacy. It's like lovemaking with life. It's like feeling the, you know, all of the energies. And I think wholeness with all of our like dark, wounded, you know, stuff means not hiding from any of it. And it's not about, and thank God it's not about being good, like 1,000%. And that's what freedom from religion is about, is like, this is not about being good. This is about being whole. This is about not abandoning ourselves. It's about not making ourselves be light, good. It's also about knowing how to wield and hold like our dark parts and our traumatized parts and our scared parts, and like really letting them have a space to live. We are complete beings.
We are who we are, and denying any part of yourself is going to cause you pain. A
Yeah.
separation from self is a problem, period. And I don't think, like, well, let me not call it a problem, but there are existences that are more whole, complete, happy, and peace filled. Like, when you're separate from yourself, you don't enjoy the journey.
Right.
You are one with yourself. Every day is an achievement of something. So even like, or every day is a step in your journey as opposed to something I have to do.
Right. Right. Right.
So before you ask Alexis, is going to be my, I guess, shameless plug time. Since you are a client, would you be willing to tell people what it's like to work with me?
Okay, well, here's what I love about working with you. And I know that you say that like your work is is like affected by our connection, but I also think that that speaks to what is so great about the way that you work with people, right? You're not asking people to walk out an intuitive journey that you're not also walking yourself. In fact, you are doing it so beautifully that you're tapping into what is needed in that moment, in that session. And so I love that your work for me aligns with the way that I live my life, right? We meet around the new and full moons. You assign me rituals. I also get to talk about like the real stuff that's coming up for me in my life. The stuff that's great, the stuff that's hard, the stuff, all the things in between. And so I feel like you are the pace at which you move things along is so appropriate to like what is needed right now in this moon phase and this phase of your existence, and how are you um how's it all being reflected in and around you. And so I love the wholeness that it's not life coaching in the classical sense. It's like the best kind of spiritual intuitive check-ins where I feel so, because I hold so much space for so many people, I recognize I also need to be held. And I love a good mix of structure and like juicy intuition. Like that works really well for me. And so the structure that you work with works really well for me. Um, and I love the deep stuff that comes through. I love like for example, talking about where I decided that certain things about me were bad and then I needed to shove them down. And there was this memory that Alexis could see of mine, of like there's this situation where there's like a man standing over you.
It was the weirdest thing because I just saw this. It was, and it's not like the seeing for me, it's just the knowing, but it's like I know this scene is where this man, and he's like down on you, standing over you.
Yeah, like standing over you. And I didn't realize, but I'd had this. I mean, it didn't come up in the session, but it came up for me later as I was kind of like thinking through everything. I had this experience as a kid where I was trying to be Madonna, and I had just seen the MTV Video Music Award show where she was like rolling around in a wedding dress singing like a virgin, and the whole world was like captivated by her. And I was like, I want to be that. That's amazing. So I asked my grandpa to dance, and we danced for a minute, and then I just let go of his hands and started rolling on the ground. And I remember him just standing over me and being like, that's not how you dance. What are you doing? And then he and my mom and my grandma just left murmuring about me as they went around the corner into the kitchen. And I was just like laying there on the ground, like, what just happened? Because I didn't understand any of it. I was too young to understand that it was sexual. I was just like, I didn't know. I was just trying. And so it was such a great example of this non-traumatic memory that really shaped a lot of who I am. And I feel, and that was interesting to me because sometimes it's the subtle things in life that really make an impression on us, and it doesn't always have to be a big trauma.
That's a really good point that I don't think people acknowledge often enough when it
Mhm.
comes time to validate a feeling or validate a source of something, that like, oh, it was just that one time that I learned that I didn't even know I was being sexual, but I learned by doing it wrong that I was.
Yeah, and
I wanna be
shame.
strong. Yeah.
Shame becomes such an early teacher in our lives. And and there's a difference between like a healthy amount of like guilt when you cross a boundary or do something wrong, and shame, which tells us that we are something wrong. And I think that in that moment, even though none of the adults reacted in a way that was like inappropriate or even out, and there was nothing wrong with how they reacted, they kind of just brushed me off. Handled I believed that there was something wrong with me.
Became a part, shame becomes a part of an identity that you carry. So it is like that, like, yes, that I am something wrong, but even it begins to shape the expectations for your identity, whatever it is. It shapes like, oh, is something wrong with me in this way? So I don't expect to be this kind of person. I don't expect to be all this thing because I'm not good at that. Or this part thing that I like to do is wrong. Or this,
Yeah.
so like that was well, so thank you for that. That just made me feel
all your work.
and tender hearted and sunshine and like just I'm all opened up. So then now I hopefully in the back of your mind there was a question brewing. I'm
Mm.
a little bit nervous, but I don't know why. Um, so what do you want to ask Alexis?
Well, what was your defining spiritual awakening? What was that like for you?
Oh, that's okay. Wow. So you're just gonna make me tell the world. So, I was sitting on the couch right over there, and I had gone through a breakup and got fired from my job. And this was the second time I got fired, but I was a very like high achiever, like to, as long as I'm close to the top, I feel safe. So like I was a decorated, well, the first time I got fired, I was a decorated employee, and it was due to some racism. And then the second time it was just a happenstance. Like the principal got fired and I was the principal secretary, so I got fired. And I
Mm.
lost my man, and then I took that job to make that job made me take a significant pay cut, but I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to make that relationship, like give that relationship a chance. And before, working too much was something that caused me friction in a lot of relationships.
Mm.
So I was extra busted and disgusted. I was broke and bored a lot. And I like told myself, like, Alexis, you grew up like this. You ain't gonna die being bored. So, go back to what you know. And then I realized I had a TV addiction. So I'm terrified of addiction because all of my parents are addicts.
Mm.
Um, and so then I like started just sitting in silence. And this one particular day I was sitting in silence. And then I also was in this giant library.
Wow.
And I did not leave my living room. I was in both places at the same time. And not like it wasn't like both places like, oh, I'm having this vision or this dream. It was like I am here and I can touch things, and I am also here and I can touch things. Like it wasn't like here or there. It's like here, and you're aware of both, and nothing's wrong, nothing's different about your awareness of both other than the fact that you are in two places at one time. And so in the library, it was like this giant Harry Potter style, like books everywhere, like one of those ones where you gotta like slide on the ladder to get to other. And I was like, fuck, I don't know the Dewey Decimal System. And then, because we think about getting it right, right? Like, so then, but I knew it had the knowledge of the universe. So it's kind of like, whoa, I don't know the Dewey Decimal System. And then the voiceless voice was like, you'll know whatever you need to know whenever you need to know it.
Wow.
And I had this like wave of security wash all over me. And I had not known that feeling before ever. The way that I like to describe it so people can get an idea is that like when new moms are looking down at their babies and they're all happy and just loving their baby, and the baby's looking back and cooing, how the baby feels, not how the mama feels. Because mama got too much life and protection and all that. But the baby is just like, I'm being best with love and I'm secure and stable and I'm gonna smile and laugh and connect.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, you're an oracle. I'm like, what the fuck's an oracle? Because this is how I talk. This is you're like nothing. I'm white. You wake up wherever you are, and
Yeah.
I'm still discovering what that means. And it was like Google it. And so I did Google it, and there was like the death because all I thought was the lady in the Matrix. And
Right.
it's ironic. That's probably what it's like. And so then I Googled it was like the lady in the Matrix, Jesus, or some great spiritual teacher like Jesus, like Buddha, like they all came up, or like the supercharged land, like where you go and that, like the Oracle of Delphi. But there was this book that was there called The Oracle Within by a lady named Jennifer Posada.
Wow.
And I got the book 2 days later. By this time, I am like back in my normal reality. I'm flipping out, thinking I'm going crazy. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but I also knew I wasn't crazy, right? Like, so it's like it gave me compassion for people who have mental illness or who have, because you, I was in two places at one time. I had this experience, like I had this experience, but then I know that this experience is not supposed to be possible. So I must be crazy, but I know I'm not crazy. So I called my brother and I called my friend and I said, like, so I didn't, I had no spiritual knowledge other than like I studied Buddhism in college. I was a Jesus freak for 2 years in the Black church. Um, I went to like the Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints, those people,
Mhm.
Mormons. I went to their church a couple times. They had it like, so I was a seeker in that way, but I didn't really have like knowledge. And so I called my brother. I'm like, hey, Phil, something's happening, and if I go full blown crazy, you are not allowed to commit me. Okay, you got to be a monk or a shaman or somebody like that, and you send them in there to come get me. And
Right.
so 2 days later, I get the book. I don't read it for about a week. Like I said, everything's normal again. But when I read the book, it's about Jennifer was a small girl, like she grew up in a small town and she was never asleep. So like she would heal bones, she would pass out and have premonitions, which by the way is how Harriet Tubman did the Underground Railroad. She would pass out for a spell and then come back and know where to go.
Shut up.
Um,
I didn't know that. That's
it
awesome.
was true. You can Google it, but
What?
also like it is. I found it out through a couple other means when it was happening, and
Wow. Oh,
it became quite inspirational for me, especially in my allyship work, right? Like being an intuitive and then in my allyship work and share future or bust, there is there's a connection that I feel that I don't know. Anyway, I'm getting so read the book and she had a botched surgery, but she knew it was gonna be botched. She just didn't tell her mother because she didn't want her mom to freak. And her mom was like, can you do that thing where you pass out and know on purpose? And she's like, I don't know, let me see. And she passed out in the bed and she was in my library, word for word. It was like the whole, and I was like,
I have
and I,
so many chills right now. Oh my God. Whew. Oh,
I knew I wasn't crazy
wow.
because the voice told me to Google it. I get the book 2 days later, Reality is Soul Back Together. And then it's this experience that I had that I didn't have any language or words for around any of what it meant. And it told me to get the book, right? Like I got the book based on it telling me to Google it. So now you couldn't tell me nothing. And then like during that time, the veil was, I can't say the veil was open now, but I know how, like it wasn't wide open like now I know how some people experience it. But for me, being the only person I know in my life like that, I would think of things and they would pop up in my reality. That's how I learned you can manifest. But like stuff from childhood, I got this Native American Rain Man doll that I broke as a child, but it was a memory that it like kept popping back up. And I was helping my friend clean out her house, her boss's house, and a picture that was there reminded me of the story. But I was also like floating around during like that day. That particular day, it felt like I was floating and I call it vibrating on love. When I went to walk into the house, the trees leaned closer to me. And not like because the wind blew, but like they both leaned in like this. Some stuff
Mm-hmm.
is happening. It's like, what crazy? Like that didn't just happen. And then, it was a thing. And
Yeah.
so I was thought of that memory, and then I walk around the corner in my friend's boss house. Why is that doll sitting on top of the buffet? It's just sitting right there right after I just thought about it. And so then it was like, oh, I could just think of reality. I'm gonna think it all. And I would think of things and they would happen. And I was like, oh, I am Jesus. That is how I felt. It was like, oh, this is what Jesus was talking about. I want to be the best Jesus ever. Because then I realized that I immediately went right into ego creation and had like, I was judging men. So like, oh, no wonder it's all messed up. No wonder these are the horrible, like, no wonder you got crucified. He said, oh, I'm gonna die for the cause. So that's when I realized I'm gonna live for the cause, right? So I made these changes based on my judgment. But man, I was judging it up. And then now, 4 years later, I see the error of my ways. I see them like, oh, that was just the start of the journey, and like the first hit gets you hooked, and then
Well, that is the thing. That is the thing, is that when you have those like blissed out experiences where the world is in real time responding to what you know you're channeling in from some other dimension, it's fucking crazy. And you're so right about the first hit being like, you're fucked after that. You're in. You
it's
have to
like,
keep
oh, you can't unknow what you know.
going. Yeah.
You
Oh.
gotta stay the course. And by the way, you gotta unpack your shit while navigating shit. And then there's this threshold where it's no longer shit you're navigating, it's your success you're navigating. And guess what? Your shit still come up when you're navigating the success. So like it's and that's the thing that I realized not too long ago. I wish I would have realized it sooner, but like that experience, as magical and mystical as it was, as much as it taught me, as much as like that you'll know whatever you need to know whenever that's how my intuition works. Like I just be knowing stuff and then but only in the moment I need to know it. So there's not this comfort where you walk up and you're like, oh, you know ahead of time. That was only in the beginning when I needed to learn that I had intuition. It was like, hey, you need to
Right.
go here. And then when you get there, you know what to do. Not even like you need to go here and do this. Just like go here and then you be obedient, you go here, and then it's like nothing, 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 nothing. Tell them this. Wow. Right? Like it's and if you was like, I don't even know what that means. If you only knew that that's all I know. Right?
Mhm.
Like I said this and you're saying wow, and all I know is that I had to say that.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
but that is all of that is still just for you to be able to live your life. Like it
Mhm.
is not, it is mystical, it's magical, but it's not that magic pill we were talking about that takes you out of the journey or like from there it's easy street. Frankly, from there it's difficult street because you gotta face all your shit. And you gotta face it with presence.
Yeah, it
And you
is.
find to yourself when you don't.
Yeah. That's the part, is the unavoidable transformation that happens, that is, I think, yeah. I mean, it but the journey is everything. The journey is everything. And yeah, I think that that is contrary to what we value in our American, culture as a whole. Is like we value like the pinnacle moments, like the big successes, the big things, and we try to avoid the major pitfalls, right? But really it's all the little, like it's the little things that are happening in the background. It's the ways you show up when no one's looking. It's the ways that, the cultivation. It's who you are.
To be. Like that's the all we have is our choice of who to be. And sometimes we get those big moments because of who we chose to be. And sometimes we get those low moments of who we because of who we chose to be. And then there is layers on that chose to be, right? Like, because I'm a human having a black human experience. I mean, I'm a spiritual being having a black human experience. And
Mhm,
you're a spiritual being having a white and Latina, but white skin, white presenting human experience. And
mhm.
still had all those layers and like our choice is what we have, but we also have to be humans with other people who are choosing.
Right. Yes.
And,
Yes.
and that is the wondrous co-creation or the not so wondrous co-creation.
Mhm.
But it's why for me, it is shared future or bust because I committed to, now it's me and Jesus. And I'm only being funny when I say that now, but like
Right.
for the cause,
Right.
a lot of my traumas and a lot of the traumas I've inflicted
Mm,
came from not knowing who I am
mm,
and making choices that weren't beneficial for connection. But
mhm.
once I experience that bliss and connection, I want to share that with the world.
Yeah.
And being being the kind of person that lives their life that way, is the only way to do that or have any hope of having that kind of impact.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
This has been a fabulous conversation. And once again, Jen, you just be making me come out, right? Like you had me come out on the interview in the Rah Rah Collective, and then you got me coming out with my spiritual awakening story, which I have not told.
Oh.
Like I just talk, I refer to it, but I did not tell the story. Of course, you just like, hey, let me just bring them out.
Oh, I'm so glad you shared it. Thank you.
I am too because it's out there now. Just like I got an interview now for tomorrow for coming out day because I am a toddler in out years. Um, not a toddler, I'm a baby. But Cheer Bear wants to cheer on what you're doing. So I told him about the wonderful things in the introduction, but I
Mhm.
want to have you make it sensual. So let us cheer you on. And Cheer Bear, that's the sensual hip roll, right? Like you see that?
I love the sensual roll.
Yeah, he's just rolling.
That's amazing.
Yes.
That's amazing. I love it. Okay, so Cheer Bear is very appropriate for me too because I am rah rah in chief at the Rah Rah Collective, which is all about cheering each other on in business and in life. So I'm a coach for women and non-binary and trans identifying anyone who identifies as female and or somewhere on the spectrum, right, gender wise. Um, and so I love, love. Like what makes me love business coaching is the light bulb moments, the birthing of what people know to be possible and walking it out and seeing it come to life. I think that's one of the things that that I love about entrepreneurship and it's like being, you know, the I don't know, being the person who holds the faith for someone else, like seeing in them what they might not see in themselves and helping them birth that. It's like being a doula to someone's dreams. And I love every bit of that. And so then at Piper and Sloan, I have the Good Living box, which is back to, you know, my days of loving homemaking and food and style and beautiful things. The Good Living box also is meant to uplift entrepreneurs. And so I choose a selection of carefully curated items from entrepreneurs who make beautiful things by hand. And then I add a couple fun little items and put it all together in a box that comes out. Right now, it's 3 times a year.
Y'all will see an unboxing video as soon as mine gets here.
Ah, so
That is what I'm going to do. I'm going to cheer on the Good Living box. You know why? I like the good life.
yes, yes. So I love inspiring. I always talk about chasing the umami of life. So I feel like that is really ultimately my mission. I love people and food and beautiful
I
things.
need, Jen. I
With
need umami. That's
umami.
that savory. That's the flavor that makes food decadent, right? Like whatever it is, if it's got umami, when you feel that, that's what makes it like flavor crystals and endorphins and all that. I need some umami in my life. This COVID has me missing. I finally miss people in their flesh, and I need touch. I just
Mm,
want to curl up under some person and have sensual umami and food. I want some umami in my life, Jen.
yes,
Umami.
yes. The indescribable unctuousness of
Yeah,
life.
yeah. See, you you do make things more sensual.
I love that. Oh, it's been so fun to talk to you.
It
Thank you.
has been fun. I promise you, I feel like I forgot we're doing a comfy couch conversation. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for going on this journey with us. We will provide ways for you to have the Good Living box as soon as this airs. This won't air for, oh, well, this part doesn't need to be on the show. But thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and get you some umami, okay, and some unctuousness.